Hello and welcome to Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is January 30th, 2024, and we are staring at charts, specifically the Bitcoin chart here on the daily. And we are going to jump right over to our support and resistance chart. We can see that Bitcoin has come all the way up through these two weeklies here after recovering the 41.8 weekly that we were looking for. It did head up to the upper first around this weekly here at 43.2 to 3. Has now swung this wick high over here at 43,569, and it did get a close higher than this closing high as well. So it has broken the downtrend here. And the next thing that we should be aware of is wherever it puts in a closing high. In this case, we do see a short-term, low-term time frame swing high. We do not yet see a closing swing high, which would occur on any close below yesterday's wick low at 42,680. But if we did see a closing high, which would come in on any close below Monday's open at around $42,000, then we would generally be looking out for the signs of a higher low being set. Now, when evaluating bands that are contracting like this, I would target somewhere around the lower first along the bottom side of these closes here. So we kind of have a range. The lower first is currently coming in at 40,681, and the bottom side of the range close is coming in at around 41,230. So that would be generally the range that I would be looking for. If that area did not hold up, I would be targeting back down to this lower second here at 39,500 or so. Below there, and I would be looking right back to this weekly at 39K to the wick low of this deviation to the downside into the monthly at 38.5. Now, if Bitcoin did break down from there, then obviously this was a liquidity grab to the top side, back into range, and then run it down lower. Of course, that would also be breaking the monthly at 38.5. We would then target this area down here at these two weeklies at 37.7 to 36.2 next. But we would have to be on the lookout for what I just explained in terms of higher lows and or equal lows. If you do see price back down towards the lower second, if we see price closing anywhere below there and then back in the weekly and monthly zone, but that does not break this wick low, I would look out for potential bullish divergence to build and then possibly a move up from there. Of course, criteria will have to be met if that is something that we observe. But as it stands right now, Bitcoin is trading in this weekly zone at 41.8 to 43.2. If we do see it break out above this weekly at 43.2, again, keep an eye on the local wick high now, which is currently coming in at around 43,872. So basically the closes over here, these closing highs of the range is what just got ran. Above there, I would target, well, just slightly higher at around $44,000. If we did start to see that area break, I would be looking up to the next close open up here at around $45,000 to the monthly at 45.5 initially. Above there, the next monthly at $47,000, where the highs on a close have currently come in. And then, of course, above there, I'd be looking right back to the monthly swing high at 48,240 to the current wick high at around $49,000, maybe even $50,000. Above there, we're looking in the mid to low $50,000 region. So that's kind of the initial look on things right now. If we look at Stoke momentum here, we can see that the daily is pivoted at 41,164. So it still has some room in terms of price. Now we do see that Stoke is in the bullish control zone at this time. And we typically see the biggest moves occur on the daily and even lower term timeframes when you see Stoke getting into the overbought and oversold zones. So I would keep a close eye on this day over day. And of course, we will be talking tomorrow during the live stream as we do have the monthly close coming in. So that's going to be on Thursday. And then, of course, we'll follow up on Friday. But in this case, you know, it is something to pay attention to. If that pivot were to get dropped at 41,164, I would be looking for things to run back to the lows and then, you know, keep an eye out for the actual supports there at the weekly monthly zone at $38,500 to $39,000. We can see that we are getting price volatility ticking up. That is BBWP. But we are seeing compression of the Bollinger Bands. So let's go to a cleaner chart here to see that. We can see that we're getting what I had explained that I want to see to set up the next bigger move. And that is, some compression of the bands, because we were coming off of an expansion to the upside, a run right back to the lower bands, and then a move right back to the basis, and kind of playing in between the upper first and lower first on a close. That is going to lead to Bollinger Band compression. And then we await a close above the upper first, upper second to get re-expansion to the upside, and or the lower first followed by a close below the lower second, of course, that breaks down below the lows. So support and resistance, in addition to getting volatility expansion to the downside to look for a move further down. And, the same goes for the upside above 43,800 and this $44,000 upper second standard deviation. We still need to see Bitcoin close back above $45,000 to really start to get expansion back to this deviation high up here on a close at around 47 at the monthly, and then the wick highs that ran that bear market monthly swing high at 48,240, putting in that wick high at 49,000. So that is something that is going to start developing over, maybe today's into tomorrow's closure, if it hangs out between the upper and lower first standard deviation zone. So that kind of gives price a downside range of around that 40,006 to 800. Of course, that being the lower first, and then the closes on the lows here of this range. And then on the upside or top side here, that would be trading back above the upper first at around $43,000, basically $42,950 to $43,000. Take out this closing high here at 43,325, 326 area, and then start to test that upper second. That's where we begin to see that expansion. But in this case, if it does hang out, between around $43,000 to the top side and above around 40,600 to 800 on the bottom side, we'll see the bands quickly start to compress. While volatility relative to the bands is remaining pretty high. So we want to see the resolution of that. I do want to see further compression here. I do think that moves to the upside and downside that fail to break any kind of resistance to the upside or support to the downside likely going to get picked up, and we see the bands go into a deeper compression here. I do want to remind you guys of the monthly as well. This is something that we do need to pay attention to coming into the end of the month. So if you don't watch tomorrow's live stream, the upper second standard deviation on the monthly is at around $42,000. So we want to see the monthly close above there to really get this BBWP number expanded, or to have that number go up and see further expansion of the Bollinger Bands here on the monthly time frame. Now, after kicking off expansion on the monthly, we have always seen new all-time highs shortly thereafter, but typically we see the bear market lower high over here, like back here in 2022 in this case. Every prior cycle, we have seen Bitcoin run the bear market, the first bear market lower high, and then pull back to wherever the upper first standard deviation is in relation to the support and resistance zone. So we can see that the upper first standard deviation of the monthly here is coming in at that $35,000 support area. We often do see it wick through, but this is going to update at the end of the month, so it's going to move up. And I would suspect that it's likely going to move up into this weekly zone here, this 36.2 to 3 to 37.7 weekly zone. So we'll have to monitor that coming into our live stream on Friday. I also will have a Staring at Charts video on Thursday where I will follow up with the monthly close and get you those numbers as well. In this case, I do also want to look at a few other medium-term timeframes, and that would be the 2-day. We can see that the 2-day is, this is a new 2-day candle now. We saw that the 2-day did reclaim the basis band here, and that's currently being back tested in the lower term timeframes. That's coming in at around 42,800, trading slightly below there now. But a nice run back, expansion to the upside, little bit of a range setup, not really what I would consider deep compression of the Bollinger Bands, but in this case, a nice run down to the lower second and and then a pop right back up to the basis band. If this is going to be bearish from the 2-day time frame perspective, we would start to see this closing back below the lower first at around that $41,000 level. And then it would specifically have to break down, close a candle below the lower second here at 39,169, and take out the wick low on a close at 38.5 at the monthly there. Of course, you can see how this lines up pretty perfectly with prior resistance, and then nice bounce off of that as it was tested as support. What you should pay attention to is this, though, and that's the pivot. The pivot is at 39,181, so go figure. This is going to be right around the lower second standard deviation of the Bollinger Band. So in this case, that would mean if on the 2-day time frame we see price pull all the way back to the lows, let's say the daily runs out of momentum, starts breaking down from those levels we just talked about, and runs right back to the lows. Well, the lower second is right there, right? And that is the 2-day momentum pivot. And it is turned up and coming out of the oversold zone. And in this case, I would be looking at that area if it held up as being kind of a counter to any kind of downside signals, mainly because if that pivot were to hold up and it bounces off of that lower second standard deviation again, it's got less work to do to take out its local high. Now, of course, this is a lower low on the 2-day time frame, so we do need to keep in mind that if it were to paint a high, that would also be a lower high. And then we do have to be aware that closing anywhere below the closing lows would be continuation of trying to at least test the downside wick there at 38.5. The closing lows on the 2-day is coming in at 39,525. Any close below there would be another closing lower low available. Then we have to keep an eye on 38.5. If that area were to break, we'd look for downtrend continuation. And in this case, I would want to see this actually, I'd want to see this come down from the 2-day perspective and try to hold this area if it's going to be bullish and take out this now lower swing high in the lower term time frames. If it were to paint a high like that, that would be the bullish scenario. As it stands, this can come all the way back up and run these highs again. From the 2-day time perspective, it needs to get back above the upper first, upper second to start getting expansion again. The upper first is coming in at 44,620. The upper second is now at 46,300 to 400 area. It's 435, 435. So it's actually 46,4 to 5, right around the 2-day highs here, just below them at that $47,000 area. So if we did see that closed above, I would be looking for the wick highs up here to get ran somewhere around $49,000 to $50,000. And then we come back to it later. We would need to see expansion, and currently this is in a contraction phase. Let's go ahead and take a look at BBWP here real quick. Yeah, so this is starting to show that this is ready for a bit of mean reversion, which it's pretty much already done. So it has kicked off its mean reversion to the basis band of the Bollinger Bands already on the 2-day time frame. But any kind of a move back to the upside, be very cautious about. And, even in this case, back to the downside, if the wick lows or wick highs of those deviations, to the downside 38.5, to the upside $49,000 don't get broken, this is probably going to go into a compression phase from the 2-day time frame perspective, and we're probably looking at a long and boring, transition from winter into spring. And of course, that's also going to be a transition into what is coming up in April, which is going to be the halving. So the next thing that I do want to take a look at is the 3-day here. And the 3-day is going to be pivoted at 40,325. So if the next 3-day closure does come in above there, we do see we have an initial cross back to the upside. We see that the 3-day is getting compression now after a nice big move up. A pin out at the upper second and third standard deviation range or zone. And in this case, a move right back to the lower second, held that on 2 wicks, and then moved back to the basis. So we do see that, this price has been, did see an uptick in volatility after spiking the upper second and third zone. But then the move back down through the basis band has literally just been back to that lower second standard deviation, thus kicking off compression. This is actually the kind of compression that you want to see. This is what I would want to see we're starting to get this look on the daily. We want to see this on the 2-day. And that does mean that if we were to see the lower second standard deviation dropped at around 40,000, 40,100 here, basically right on the close open lows of the 3-day. If that area is dropped, be aware of the lower third where the wick low is coming in. If we start to see 3-day closures below there, we're looking for expansion down into these downside supports. The top side area coming in and the 37 4 to 7 area at the weekly, and then the downside area at around 35 to 35.5, which is a monthly area as well. So that's what I would be looking for. And on the other side of that, if we start seeing the 3-day close back above the upper first, which is right around where yesterday's wick high came in at around that 43 8 to 9 area, coming in just above there in the low 43.9s, so basically above $44,000. We would have to keep an eye on that upper second, and that's coming in at that monthly right around 45.2. So above there, we would see re-expansion of the Bollinger Bands, and price volatility would kick up into high gear. So that's where we would start to target, that the high at $46,000 on the weekly, and then the wick highs up there at 49 to 50, possibly beyond into the mid to low $50,000 zone. We have also seen, we're going to see a 4-day closure, and you can see how this is really lining up. We had the nice expansion to the upside, mean reversion back to the lower first standard deviation, come back, grab onto the basis band. The upper first is riding the top side of this current range that Bitcoin's back trading in prior to the deviation to the upside and downside. That is roughly around 44. And in this case, it's in the lower $44,000 region, so 44 to 44.5. Splitting the difference there, coming in around 44,371. If you do start to see Bitcoin pushing towards this upper first on the daily, check the 4-day chart. This is likely going to be at 44.5. Above there, we're looking right back to the highs on a close around $46,000 to $47,000. And then, of course, this would start to look like continuation above there and re-expansion of BBWP and the Bollinger Bands back to the highs and higher. From the 4-day perspective, we can see that downside pressure from Stoke on this 4-day is sitting at around 45,680. Let's go back to the 3-day. I don't remember if I said the pivot. I think I did. 40,330. 2-day is going to be 39,181, and then that daily's coming in at 41,164, 41.2 or so. All right, so that's going to be kind of it for today. What I will caution you about is 12-hour is currently pointed down. 43,200 is the pivot. That would turn it back up in the overbought zone here. And from the 12-hour time frame perspective, we're looking at basically it's kind of in the zone that it needs to be right now to make this available at 43.2. But the upper first standard deviation is coming in at 42,692. So for all intents and purposes, it's around 42,700. If Bitcoin can maintain that that upper first on a close, then I would be targeting, this as an area, with this being the downside area if it closes above it, the upside zone being that upper second standard deviation there, which is coming in at that $44,000 level. Of course, that is where all of these top side closes are coming in on the daily. Little consolidation here and some closing highs and wick highs that go slightly above into the mid $44,000 and $45,000 range. So this would be something to be aware of and something to watch on the lower term timeframes. Another time frame that I would advise you keep an eye on is the 4-hour. As right off the lows here, we saw a little bit of an inverted head and shoulders kind of playing out. If this was going to play out like that, It's kind of a tilted head and shoulders. It'd basically be testing the neckline right now. I'm not going to go and draw head and shoulders on my charts. You guys can do that. I'm sure you all know what it is. There would be a measured move to be had. And the easiest way that I've taught people to do this is, you can take the closes if you want. You can take the wicks if you want. I prefer to take the closes. And you can just draw one side, right? So if this is a tilted head and shoulders, this breakout retest, and if it does take off, you only need that one side. You don't need to draw it straight up to a line. You'll get this is the same as doing that. So in this case, we can say, if this was going to be it, where would the inverted head and shoulders, kind of come in at? And it looks like it would be right around 46,500. So it would be, testing the highs of the range and that deviation high up there. From the 4-hour time frame perspective, we do see that Bitcoin, since coming off the lows, consolidating, and then putting in a nice higher low right here to a higher high. We did see another higher low to higher high, and then equal lows coming in to higher highs. So we do have an uptrend here. We also saw a nice compression after the move off of the lows here. So we saw the consolidation, the nice move up, nice consolidation, compression to re-expansion, and then a back test of the basis band. If this was going to play out like an inverted head and shoulders, which it's kind of not, I keep seeing it everywhere, which is one of the reasons why I'm pointing it out. It's probably, if it's going to play out like that, we're going to see this bounce off of, at minimum, the lower first here. So, and that would be 42,130, basically holding somewhere around $42,000. Problem is, a lot of those types of patterns, what you'll find is they end up in throwbacks right back to, in this case, you get the breakout deviation, then a throwback to the head, that kind of stuff. I don't really deal with patterns, as you guys know, but I keep seeing it everywhere. And in this case, that would just be right back to the lows, somewhere around 40,000, 39,500 or so, and lower down to that monthly at 39, or that weekly at 39, monthly at 38.5. If it does get back above this upper second standard deviation, we would start to see this, get re-expansion or more aggressive expansion. After this compression here, it's just a little expansion. So I would be prepared for a little bit of a lower term time frame cool down if this starts to hold around the basis, and only if you start to see the lower second around 42, and then subsequently the range below here, which is at a weekly at 41.8, that being this weekly back here, only if you do start seeing that area, that being the daily basis, that we would probably be looking at a larger markdown back to run those lows again or retest the consolidation breakout back into range. I think that's going to do it for today. I will be back on tomorrow with a live stream and be taking requests tomorrow as well. So if you do show up, know what it is that you want to request for altcoins or stocks. Please, only one at a time, if you can, if you guys can control yourselves. And then, we'll have some fun. We'll do some live TA. But you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out.